I've always believed that the key to a happy marriage is silence. Not the romantic, we don't need words kind of silence, but the, if I tell her how much I actually make she'll buy a golden toilet kind of silence. My name is Mark, and according to my wife Chloe's Instagram, I am a tech-adjacent assistant who's lucky enough to share a bed with a PR goddess. In reality, I'm a software architect. I solve problems that involve more zeros than Chloe has followers, and I do it while wearing socks that I'm pretty sure have been discontinued since the late 90s. Chloe works in PR. If you aren't familiar with the industry, it basically means her job is to convince people that expensive water is wetter than tap water. She's obsessed with the girl boss aesthetic. You know the type. Blazers with shoulder pads sharp enough to take out an eye, $9 lattes, and a vocabulary consisting entirely of words like synergy, manifesting, and impactful. She's so busy manifesting her best life that she's completely failed to notice who's actually paying for the manifestation. For the past 3 years, our financial dynamic has been a masterpiece of delusion. Chloe spends her entire paycheck on Gucci belts, artisanal candles that smell like ambition, and dinners with influential friends who are really just people with leased Ferraris and maxed out Amex cards. Meanwhile, I'm the ghost in the machine. I pay the mortgage, I pay the property taxes, I pay for the insurance, the utilities, and the $400 a month organic landscaping service that Chloe insists we need so the neighbors don't think we're struggling. I never corrected her. Why would I? It was like watching a kid play with a toy steering wheel in the passenger seat. As long as the car stays on the road, let her think she's driving. But lately, the steering wheel started hitting me in the face. The red flags didn't just pop up. They performed a choreographed routine with pyrotechnics. It started with Brian. Brian is her creative associate, which is PR speak for the guy who spends 4 hours choosing a font. He's a walking LinkedIn profile, all teeth, cheap cologne, and a LinkedIn banner that says, Disruptor. Chloe started posting photos of them at late-night strategy sessions, with captions like, finally working with someone who matches my hustle. Ouch. My hustle, apparently, consists of sitting in my home office, which she calls the cave, and staring at lines of code that look like Matrix vomit to her. She treats my job like a hobby, something I do to keep myself busy while she goes out and wins the bread. Mark, honey, she told me last Tuesday, looking at me over her designer sunglasses while I was eating a bowl of cereal in my favorite oversized hoodie. Maybe you should try getting out more. Brian says that stagnation is the silent killer of the soul. You're just sitting there. It's hard for me to feel inspired when my partner is essentially a piece of furniture that pays for Netflix. I choked on a Cheerio. A piece of furniture? Chloe, I'm literally refactoring the entire back-end architecture for a fintech firm right now. If I stop sitting here, your credit card stops working in about 48 hours. She just rolled her eyes, that practiced cinematic roll that she probably rehearsed in the mirror. There you go again, getting defensive. It's not about the money, Mark. It's about the energy. You have the energy of a damp sponge. Try to have some self-respect. Maybe put on a collared shirt? For me? I looked down at my hoodie. It had a small coffee stain that looked vaguely like the Batman logo. I liked it. But according to Chloe, I was the ballast. The weight holding her soaring hot air balloon of a career down to earth. She didn't know that the only reason her balloon hadn't crashed into a dumpster fire was because I was tethered to the ground, holding the ropes with both hands and a very heavy bank account. But the thing about being the silent provider is that eventually, people start to think you're just a silent spectator. Chloe had started openly mocking me in our group chats. She'd send memes about stay-at-home boyfriends and tag me. Our friends, mostly her PR circle of vultures, would chime in with LOL, and Mark is so chill. I wish I could just do nothing all day. Even my own mother isn't immune. A year ago, Chloe tried to mentor my mom on how to invest her retirement savings into some sketchy crypto jewelry startup. My mom, who spent 30 years as a high-level auditor for the IRS, laughed so hard she nearly had a stroke. Chloe took it as a personal insult and told me my family was toxically stagnant. My mom blocked her on everything that same day. Best gift I ever gave her. But the real kicker? The teasing was turning into something darker. I saw a notification pop up on her iPad, which, by the way, is synced to our family cloud that I manage. Brian, is the basement dweller still there? I'm tired of having to whisper when we're on the phone. That house is way too big for 3 people, and one of them is basically a ghost. Chloe, ugh, don't remind me. He's like a permanent fixture. I'm working on it, babe. Once the next big contract hits, I'm making moves. I need a man who owns the room, not a man who hides in the office. I didn't get angry, not the break a plate kind of angry. I got the software architect kind of angry. I started looking at the system. I found the bugs. I identified the vulnerabilities. And then I started writing the patch. The big contract she was waiting for, it was the launch party for a new lifestyle brand. And she decided to host the pregame at our house, my house. The house she thinks she graciously allows me to live in because she's such a provider. She spent 3 days barking orders at me. Mark, hide your disgusting gaming chair. Mark, make sure the caterers use the side entrance. Mark, please, for the love of God, try to look like you belong in a luxury zip code. I just smiled. It was the smile of a man who knows exactly how the movie ends, while everyone else is still buying popcorn. I even helped her set up the bar. I was being supportive. I was being the supply guy. You're being very helpful today, she said, patting my cheek like I was a golden retriever that had finally learned to sit. Maybe there's hope for you yet. Just stay out of the way when the real people arrive, okay? Brian's bringing some very important investors. Of course, honey, I said, leaning back in my disgusting chair. I wouldn't want to ruin the vibe. The stage was set. The vultures were circling. And little did Chloe know, I had just finished the final line of code for her social deletion. Friday night arrived with the kind of pomp and circumstance usually reserved for a minor royal wedding. Chloe had spent the entire afternoon vibrating at a frequency that could probably shatter expensive glassware. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my first car, a sleek emerald green number that screamed, I have a PowerPoint presentation at 6 and a gala at 8. Her hair was pulled back so tight I was worried her eyebrows might eventually meet at the back of her skull. The house, my house, was transformed. She'd hidden my collection of vintage consoles behind a silk room divider and replaced my ergonomic keyboard with a vase of lilies that smelled like a funeral home. Mark, for the love of God, change your shirt, she hissed as the first doorbell rang. I was wearing a black polo, clean, ironed, and perfectly respectable. You look like a security guard. People are going to ask you where the bathroom is. Well, I do know where the bathroom is, Chloe. It's a useful skill, I replied, grabbing a sparkling water. The vultures began to descend. There was Sarah, who curates digital experiences. She posts TikToks. Marcus, an angel investor, whose only successful investment was likely his father's inheritance. And of course, Brian. Brian strolled in like he owned the place. He was wearing a linen suit in the middle of autumn, looking like a discarded extra from Miami Vice. He didn't even look at me when he walked past. He just headed straight for Chloe, grabbed her by the waist, and gave her a kiss on the cheek that lasted exactly 3 seconds too long for just a colleague. Place looks great, Chloe, Brian boomed, his voice carrying that unearned confidence of a man who has never been told no by a HR department. Very you, minimalist, chic, expensive. It really reflects your trajectory. Thanks, Brian, Chloe beamed, casting a dismissive glance toward the hallway where I was standing. It's a lot of work maintaining a certain standard, especially when you're the only one pulling the weight. But hey, somebody has to keep the lights on, right? A few of her friends chuckled. I just leaned against the kitchen island, watching the disruptor eye my $2,000 espresso machine like he was planning where to put it in his own apartment. The catering arrived around 8 p.m. It wasn't just food, it was edible art. Tiny towers of tuna tartare, gold-leafed sliders, and something involving truffle oil that smelled suspiciously like a mechanic's garage. The bill was north of $2,000. I knew this because I'd already seen the notification on my phone when the deposit was swiped 2 days ago. As the delivery guys were setting up, Chloe did something truly cinematic. She reached into her designer clutch, pulled out a sleek platinum card, and held it up like a trophy. "Don't worry about the tip, boys," she said loudly, making sure the entire room was listening. "I've got the budget under control, as usual." She turned to her circle of friends, leaning in as if sharing a juicy secret, though her voice stayed at stage whisper volume. "Honestly, girls, if I didn't keep a tight leash on this broke loser's spending, we'd be living in a cardboard box under a bridge by now. Mark literally doesn't understand the concept of liquidity. He thinks a budget is something that happens to other people. I basically have to give him an allowance just so he doesn't starve while I'm out winning contracts." The room went quiet for a second. It was that thick, suffocating kind of silence that happens when someone crosses a line so far they can't even see it in the rearview mirror anymore. Sarah suddenly found her expensive pedicure fascinating. Marcus began inspecting a shrimp skewer with the intensity of a diamond appraiser. But Brian? Brian let out a sharp, barking laugh. "Hey, Chloe, don't be so hard on him. Every queen needs a footstool, right? Someone's got to stay home and make sure the Wi-Fi works." Chloe laughed, a high-pitched, brittle sound. "A footstool? Brian, he's more like a decorative rug. You step on it, you forget it's there, and occasionally you have to send it out to be cleaned." She then walked over to the hallway, picked up my leather wallet from the console table, the one I'd accidentally left there after grabbing the mail, and walked back into the center of the living room. "Speaking of rugs," she said, her eyes flashing with a cruel kind of triumph. "Mark, catch." She flicked her wrist and threw the wallet. It hit me square in the chest and fell to the floor with a hollow thud. "It's empty, just like his contribution to this household," she announced to the room. "Since you're just standing there looking stagnant, why don't you be a dear and go get some more wine? We're running low on the vintage Bordeaux. And try not to get lost on the way to the cellar, honey. I didn't ask for your input on the menu. I just need you to be the logistics guy. Run along." The disrespect was so thick you could have carved it with a steak knife. I looked down at my wallet lying on the hardwood floor. I looked at Brian, who was smirking at me while sipping a drink I had paid for. I looked at Chloe, who was already turning back to her friends, dismissing me like a waiter who had forgotten the napkins. I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't heat. It was a cold, crystalline clarity. It was time for a hard reboot. I didn't pick up the wallet. I didn't go for the wine. Instead, I straightened my polo, cleared my throat, and walked slowly toward the center of the room. "You know, Chloe," I said, my voice calm and conversational, cutting through the chatter like a razor. "You're absolutely right. We should talk about the budget. It's important to be transparent with your investors, isn't it, Brian?" Chloe froze. She turned around, her smile flickering like a dying light bulb. "Mark, not now. We're busy. Go get the wine." "Oh, the wine can wait," I said, flashing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "But the truth? The truth has been stagnant for way too long. Give me 1 second. I have something much more interesting than Bordeaux in my office." I turned on my heel and walked toward my cave. Behind me, I heard Chloe trying to laugh it off. "Oh God, he's going to show us his Star Wars collection or something. I'm so sorry, everyone, he's such a nerd." "Actually," I called back over my shoulder, "it's a different kind of fantasy world, Chloe. It's the one you've been living in." I stepped into my office and grabbed the heavy blue folder I'd prepared that morning. It was time to show the girl boss what a real architect does. When I stepped back into the living room, the atmosphere was thick enough to choke on. The vultures were still there, hovering around the catering trays, but the conversation had died down to a low, jagged murmur. All eyes were on the door of my office. When I emerged with that blue folder tucked under my arm, the silence didn't just fall, it slammed shut. Chloe was leaning against the kitchen island, swirling a glass of vintage Cristal that I'd bought for our last anniversary. She looked at me, then at the folder, and let out a laugh that was meant to be breezy, but sounded like breaking glass. "Oh, look at this," she said, projecting her voice so even the catering staff in the back could hear. "The architect has returned from his lair. What's that, Mark? A manifesto? Or are you finally going to show us the blueprints for the world-changing app you've been developing for 3 years, while I've been paying the bills?" Brian, standing right next to her, leaned in and whispered something in her ear that made her smirk. He looked at me with a look of pure, unadulterated pity. "Easy, Chloe. Maybe it's a list of all the different ways he can cook ramen. You have to respect the hustle of a man who's mastered the art of doing the bare minimum." I didn't rush. I walked slowly to the island, cleared a space between a plate of half-eaten Wagyu sliders and a vase of lilies, and placed the folder down. I looked Chloe dead in the eye. "You know, Chloe," I said, my voice calm and conversational, "I've spent the last hour listening to you rewrite history. It's impressive, really. If PR doesn't work out, you have a stellar career ahead of you as a fiction novelist. But the thing about fiction is that it eventually runs into the cold, hard wall of non-fiction." "Non-fiction? Is that what we're calling your little hobby now?" Chloe stepped closer, her perfume, something expensive and aggressive, hitting me in waves. "Mark, let's be real for a second. We are in a room full of people who actually do things. Brian just closed a 6-figure branding deal. Sarah just launched a national campaign. And you? You're the guy who stays in the shadows and hopes nobody notices you're a ghost in your own home." "A ghost?" I chuckled, flipping the folder open to the first page. That's an interesting choice of words, because a ghost doesn't have a signature, a ghost doesn't have a tax ID, and a ghost certainly doesn't have a bank account that looks like this. I slid the first document toward her. It was a certified bank statement, the kind that doesn't leave room for creative interpretation. "What is this?" she snapped, barely glancing at the columns of numbers. "More of your tech bro gibberish?" "It's a map, Chloe," I said. "Look at the highlighted rows. See that recurring transfer of $8,000 every month? That's from my private business account to our joint household fund. The one you told everyone tonight you manage so I don't starve. Now look at the outbound payments. That $2,500 for your PR strategy clothes, paid by that transfer. The $3,000 for the wellness retreat you took with Brian last month, also paid by that transfer." Chloe's hand, the one holding the glass, froze. Her eyes started darting across the page, her brain finally catching up to the data. This is just one account," she stammered, her voice losing its edge. "I have my own income. I'm a partner at the firm." "A partner?" I raised an eyebrow. "Chloe, I've seen your income. Your salary barely covers the interest on your 3 secret credit cards. Speaking of which," I flipped to the next page. "I took the liberty of paying off the $42,000 balance on your Amex last week. Not because I'm nice, but because I didn't want the bank's collection calls interrupting my stagnant workday. So, when you tell our friends that you subsidize me, do you mean you subsidize my patience? Because that's the only thing you've ever contributed to this household." The silence in the room was now so absolute, you could hear the hum of the wine fridge. Brian's smirk had vanished, replaced by a look of profound confusion. He looked at the paper, then at Chloe. "Chloe? What is he talking about? You said the house was part of your equity package from the early days." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Oh, Brian," I said, turning to him. "You really should do better due diligence before you try to disrupt someone's marriage. Equity package? That's adorable." I pulled out the title deed. The heavy, embossed paper felt like a weapon in my hand. I didn't slide it this time. I held it up like a trophy. "This is the deed to this house, Brian. It's held by the Sterling Family Trust. It was established years before Chloe and I even met. I am the sole trustee. I am the sole beneficiary. Chloe isn't a partner. She's not an owner. She's not even a tenant. She's a guest who's been living in a 5-star resort for 3 years and forgot to check the bill at the end of the stay." "Mark, shut up!" Chloe finally found her voice, but it was shrill, desperate. "You're lying. You're making this up to humiliate me. We're married. Half of everything is mine. Not according to the prenuptial agreement you signed in my office 3 years ago," I said, pulling the final document from the folder. Section 4. All assets previously held in trust remain separate property. And Section 9, my personal favorite. Any attempt to defraud the estate or evidence of infidelity results in the immediate termination of the right of residency. I stepped back, looking at the room of people who had been laughing at me just 20 minutes ago. Since we're all about transparency tonight, why don't we see what the girl boss and the disruptor have been planning for my house? I tapped my phone screen. The 75-inch TV behind the bar, which I'd conveniently synced to my phone earlier, flickered to life. A massive screenshot of a text thread filled the screen. "Chloe, the basement dweller is finally asleep. I can't wait until we move his stuff to the garage and turn that room into your office, Brian. You look so much better in that space than he ever did. Brian, soon, babe. Once the divorce is finalized, we'll sell his vintage junk and get a real designer in there. I've already contacted an architect, a real one." The gasps from the guests were audible. Sarah, Chloe's bestie, actually took a physical step away from her, her face a mask of disgust. "A real architect," I mused, looking at the screen. "That's a nice touch, Brian. I hope he's cheaper than I am, because you're going to need the money. Chloe, your card, the one you used to pay for this edible art tonight, it's been declined. I locked the account 5 minutes ago. The catering manager is currently in the kitchen wondering why his payment didn't go through. I suggest you go back there and explain your liquidity to him." "Mark, please." Chloe was shaking now, tears welling up in her eyes. "It was just talk. We were dreaming. You can't do this." "I'm not doing anything, Chloe. I'm just executing the code," I said, my voice turning into ice. "I've already revoked your access to the smart home system. Your phone is no longer on the Wi-Fi. Your car, the one registered to my company, the remote starter is disabled and the GPS is tracked. You have 30 minutes to pack a bag." "Just one. Brian, since you're so eager to disrupt things, you can help her carry it out to your car. I assume you have space in your minimalist apartment? Or is that a lie too?" I turned on my heel, heading for my office door. "Mark, you can't leave me like this. What am I supposed to tell people?" she screamed after me. I stopped at the door, hand on the handle. I looked back over my shoulder and gave her the smallest, coldest smile she'd ever seen. "Tell them whatever you want, Chloe. You're the PR expert. Spin it. But do it from the sidewalk. You have 28 minutes before I call the police for trespassing. And trust me, my security cameras are recording everything. I'd hate for your professional network to see the footage of you being escorted out in handcuffs." I walked into my office and closed the door. The sound of the lock clicking was the most beautiful thing I'd heard in years. I stayed in my chair. There was no reason to go downstairs and breathe the same air as the people who had just spent 2 hours laughing at my expense. I watched the security feed instead. It was like a silent movie of a social apocalypse. Brian was the first to bolt. He didn't even look at Chloe as he grabbed his linen blazer and practically vanished through the front door. The rest of the vultures followed in a blur of silk and panic, leaving the front door wide open. Chloe stood alone in the center of the living room, her expensive champagne glass still in her hand, looking at the flickering TV screen where her betrayal was still frozen in high definition. Then, the silence was broken by the heavy, rhythmic thud of her heels on the stairs. She didn't knock. She threw the door to my office open so hard it hit the wall. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed, her voice cracking into a jagged, ugly sound. She wasn't the PR goddess anymore. She was a woman whose foundation had just turned into quicksand. "You humiliated me. You aired our private business like it was some sick PowerPoint presentation. Brian is gone, Mark. My friends are gone. Do you have any idea what you've done to my reputation?" I didn't turn my chair around immediately. I looked at her with the same detached curiosity I'd used to examine a legacy bug in an old program. "Your reputation?" I asked, leaning back. "You mean the one built on my bank statements?" "That wasn't a reputation, Chloe. That was a facade. And facades require maintenance. I'm just retiring as the contractor." "You can't do this!" She marched up to my desk, slamming her glass down so hard some of the vintage crystal splashed onto my keyboard. "I am your wife. We are a team. So what if I talked a little trash? So what if Brian and I got close? I was lonely, Mark. You're always in here, in this cave being stagnant. I needed someone who actually lives life." "And yet," I said, pointing to the monitor, "the moment the stagnant guy stopped paying the bills, your life-living partner vanished faster than a 404 error. Did Brian mention where you'll be sleeping tonight? Because I checked the logs. He's already blocked your MAC address from his personal hotspot." "Mark, stop it with the tech talk." She was trembling now, her hands shaking as she reached for the blue folder I'd left on the desk. "This trust thing, it's a joke, right? You're just trying to scare me. You wouldn't actually throw me out, not after everything I've done for your image." "What exactly have you done for my image, Chloe? Aside from making me the punchline of every dinner party for the last 2 years? I stood up. "You didn't love me. You loved the lifestyle I subsidized. You loved the house I provided. You even loved the broke loser, because having a loser around made you look like a saint. But the data doesn't lie. You were planning to strip mine my life and move the disruptor into my chair." She tried to change tactics. She took a breath, smoothed her emerald dress, and tried to summon that manipulative, soft PR voice. She even managed to squeeze out a single, perfect tear. "Mark, honey, I was confused. Brian was in my head. He told me I deserved more, and I listened. But I see now. I see how much you've done. Let's send everyone an email. We'll say it was a prank, a performance art piece. We can fix this. Just turn the Wi-Fi back on. Let's go to bed and talk about this like adults." "The adult conversation happened when I signed the prenup, Chloe," I said, reaching for a small suitcase I'd kept in the corner of my office. The one she'd brought into the marriage before I replaced everything she owned with designer labels. I set it on the desk. The Wi-Fi stays off, the accounts stay locked, and the locks on the front door will cycle to a new code the moment you step outside. "You're serious," she whispered, the last of her makeup-smeared mask falling away. "You're actually kicking me out. Right now?" "You called me a supply guy, remember?" I replied, checking my watch. "A supply guy always has a solution. I've already called an Uber for you. It's a basic Toyota Camry, not a black car, not a limo. Just a standard ride for a standard person. It'll be here in 15 minutes. I suggest you start throwing things into that suitcase." She stared at me, her mouth hanging open. "A Camry? Mark, my friends. People will see." "There are no friends left, Chloe. Look around. They didn't even finish the sliders. They left the second they realized you weren't the one holding the checkbook. That's the problem with building a circle based on synergy. The moment the energy stops flowing, they disappear." She let out a sob, a real one this time, not the practiced cinematic one she used for Instagram stories. "Why?" she asked, her voice muffled as she dug through the closet. "Why tonight? Why like this?" "Because you threw a wallet at my face, Chloe," I said quietly. "You could have cheated, you could have lied about the money, and I might have just handled it through lawyers quietly. But you decided to humiliate me in my own home, in front of the people I feed. You tried to take away my dignity to boost your image. That's a bug in the system that I can't patch. I have to delete the whole program." "I hate you," she hissed, her face contorting into something unrecognizable. "You think you're so smart? You're just a lonely, pathetic little man who has to buy people's love because you have no soul." "Maybe," I said, turning back to my monitors. "But I'm a lonely, pathetic man who owns the building you're currently trespassing in. You have 12 minutes, Chloe. After that, The security system automatically triggers a vacant property alarm to the local precinct. I'd hate for your first night as a single mogul to be spent in a holding cell. She grabbed the empty suitcase, screaming a word I won't repeat, and stomped out of the office. I heard her slamming drawers in the bedroom, the sound of hangers being ripped off the rack, and the frantic, heavy breathing of someone who had finally realized the supply was gone. 10 minutes later, the front door slammed. I didn't go to the window. I didn't need to. I watched the Camry pull away on the driveway cam. It's been exactly 6 months since the great PR collapse, and I've spent most of that time enjoying the kind of silence you can only buy with a solid prenuptial agreement and a very expensive security system. People sometimes ask if it's hard to move on after a 3-year marriage ends in a 30-minute eviction. My answer? 3 years isn't a lifetime. It's just a long-running beta test that failed. I've had code refactoring projects that took longer and felt more emotionally draining than cutting Chloe out of my life. Chloe's attempt to sue me was the most entertaining piece of fiction I've read in a decade. Her lawyer, a guy who clearly specialized in personal injury and had a tan that looked like it was applied with a spray paint gun, tried to argue intentional infliction of emotional distress. They sat across from me in a glass-walled conference room. Chloe was wearing a Zara blazer, trying to look like the boss girl she used to be, but her hands were shaking so hard she couldn't even pick up her latte. My client contributed 3 years of her life to the Mark brand, her lawyer drawled, leaning back. She deserves a lifestyle settlement. The house, the trust, the liquid assets. We're looking at a 50-50 split, Mark. Or we go to court and show the world how you bullied a successful woman. I didn't even look at him. I just slid a tablet across the table. On that screen, I said, my voice as flat as a dial tone, you'll find the metadata for every single one of Chloe's credit card transactions over the last 36 months. You'll also find the geotags for her business trips with Brian, which, coincidentally, match the GPS data from the car I own. And then there's the final file, the 4K footage of the night Chloe threw a leather object at my face in front of 12 witnesses. I leaned in, watching the lawyer's tan turn a sickly shade of gray as he scrolled. In this state, Chloe, emotional distress is hard to prove when you're on camera committing battery and planning financial fraud. My offer? You take your clothes, you keep the $12,000 you borrowed from the joint account the morning after the party, and you sign a non-disclosure agreement that keeps your name out of my upcoming biography. Otherwise, I release the TV presentation to the local news. Think of the PR, Chloe. It would be impactful. She signed the papers in less than 10 minutes. She didn't even look at me when she left. She just grabbed her knockoff handbag and walked out, her heels clicking with a lot less confidence than they used to. Thanks to a few bots I have monitoring social media trends, I occasionally get a ping when her name surfaces. She's currently living in a studio apartment in a part of town where luxury means the elevator works 3 days a week. She's working as a junior social media manager for a company that sells organic dog treats. Her Instagram is still active, but the content has shifted. Now it's all about the healing journey and finding wealth in simplicity. She posts photos of her morning oatmeal with captions like, stripping away the excess to find the real me. Translation: she can't afford the $9 lattes anymore, and the only thing she's manifesting is her rent payment. As for me, I sold the house. Every time I walked into that living room, I could still smell the lingering aura of Chloe's fake synergy. I bought a new place. It's all concrete, glass, and steel. There are no guest rooms. There is no lifestyle branding. It's just me, my servers, and a view of the ocean that doesn't require a filter to look beautiful. I'm currently dating a woman who's a senior cybersecurity analyst. Our first date was 4 hours of us arguing over the best way to encrypt a private database. She wears hoodies, she pays for her own coffee, and she thinks girl boss is a derogatory term for someone who doesn't understand back-end logic. Last night, I found an old wallet in a moving box. It was the one Chloe threw at me. It was empty, just like it was that night. I looked at it for a second, remembered the broke loser comment, And then I did the only logical thing. I tossed it into the fireplace. It burned with a bright, clean flame.